Okay, guys, we are going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to try to get my video to stay on the screen this time. But thank you so much for coming. My name is Jennifer Sheridan. I'm the Family Services Coordinator here at the Coleman Center in Petal, Mississippi. And today we are going to talk just for a short time about the brain and body and our connection to how this affects behavior specifically in young children. But I have a feeling we're also going to see how these behaviors also show up in our own lives as parents, as caregivers, as just human beings. So we're just going to jump right in. So first off, if I can get my slide to go, the first thing we need to know about the brain is we create these neural pathways in our brains that are much like cow paths in the body. Now, if you have grown up in the country, or maybe just you live in a rural part of America like I do, you have been, you drive by cow paths all the time. You drive by fields that have cows in it. And if you look closely, you can see, just like in this picture, you can see where cows they go the same direction every time when they're heading to a specific place. They'll follow each other in a line. And as those cows walk down the grass, now the first time they walk down, the grass will pop right back up. The second, third time, maybe the grass lays down a little bit more. But eventually that path becomes so ingrained in the soil and in the field where they are that it becomes a very clear path, just like in this picture. Our neural pathways are the exact same. We develop these ways of behaving, we develop these ways of thinking in our brains that become so ingrained that is very difficult to change the way that we think. But the good news is, thanks to neuroplasticity, we can actually change the way our brain is wired, which is excellent news, especially for those of us who may have had difficult experiences as young children. When we have that, oftentimes we are unable to understand really how we are to cope. We are unable to understand how we are to interact with other people in a healthy and appropriate way. And so lots of times, especially with kiddos that I've worked with throughout my practice who maybe experienced a difficult birth, who may have experienced early hospitalization, maybe they were in and out of different homes in their early life. All of these things contribute to children who've experienced trauma, who've experienced harmful interactions. When we experience those in such an early time in our life, we will often create these neural pathways that are so ingrained in us that when we reach a safe and happy place that is secure, where everyone else around us would say, yes, you are in safety, yes, you are in a place where you are comforted and all your needs are being provided for, we often will still go down that cow path, down that neural pathway that we've created in a system of harm, and we're unable to see how, oh gosh, okay, now I don't have to act like that anymore to get my needs met. I can act a different way. And so thankfully, our brains were created to where we don't have to live down that same path. We don't have to continue to choose that for our life, but it can be very difficult to learn a new pathway. And really that's what we're interested in when we talk about kids, is how do we develop in them this new neural pathway. So I have a short 2-minute video that I thought I really wanted to show you because I thought it was really great at explaining how these pathways work in our brains. So check this out. Not so long ago. Okay, so we see here that we can, in fact, rewire our brain. We can, in fact, change the way that we are able to think about things. The hard part is that this does take considerable effort, and it takes us as caregivers, as parents, as teachers, in whatever capacity that we're in. It takes us understanding that our child may not be there immediately. Our child may not be there right when this happens. So how do we do this? How do we change these neural pathways? How do we change the brain so that the body responds how we want the body to respond? Some of us may even experience things like anxiety, things like depression, whether we're a child or whether we're an adult. And sometimes those things come about because we've created a neural pathway that tells us we are in danger when we are in fact not in danger. I mean, this is why we see panic attacks. This is why we see high anxiety in a situation where no one else is experiencing this type of anxiety. Well, it's because we have created this neural pathway in our brain to say, like, I should be in danger. When I experience this, I should be in danger. And what we have to do, whether it is through therapy, whether it is through exposure to the situation that desensitizes us, whatever it may be, but we have to create that new neural pathway to say to our brain, all parts of our brain, especially the amygdala, that this is no longer something I need to fear. This is something that I can go into confidently and saying, I will remain safe when I do this. So we're going to look at 3 different ways that we can help to support, empower our kiddos and really ourselves in order that we can optimize our brain. So the first one is nutrition. Now, if you have read any books about childcare, any books about parenting, you know this is part of it. And to say this is difficult, I mean, gosh, we are living in a state here in Mississippi where health and nutrition is oftentimes not readily available. We have a lot of food deserts here in Mississippi. And so to say this is easy is missing the whole spectrum, I think, of where people are in their lives. But I think nutrition is one of the key things that we can do to really support the developing brain, and I would say even the brain of an adult who is trying to maximize all the brain I have developed. And so we can see here on the left all these things that contribute, that we get from adding good nutrition, faster language development, which is what we're interested in, right? When our kids are young, we want to know how fast are they going to talk? When are they going to start having a conversation? When are they going to start being able to communicate their needs and telling me they're upset instead of just throwing down and having a temper tantrum? Even things like fine motor skills development, a better wired brain, all of these things can be supported with good nutrition. Now, 95% of serotonin is made in the gut, which is really interesting because we think of serotonin as a neurotransmitter that just exists in our brain. And so it must just be the brain that's making all of this. But actually, 95% is such a huge amount, and it's all developed right there in our gut. So if we are having GI issues, if we are having a diet that's high in processed sugar and processed foods, then we are going to see a decrease in serotonin. Our body is not able to create that, and the receptors that are there to take in the serotonin that is created within our bodies from these amino acids, they're oftentimes not able to do that. Also, the risk of depression decreases 25 to 35% when we look at people who eat traditional diets. So things like Mediterranean diet, studies have been done in a lot of Asian countries, China and Japan, where the people eat a very traditional diet, high in plant-based foods, high in plants and fruits, and clean meats like fish and seafood. And so they've seen this really large decrease in depression and other health concerns as compared to a Western diet. And so I always want to encourage families to really look at that. If you feel like, these are issues within your family, within your children, take a look at the diet. It's one of the first things that we can do. And we don't even have to go to a doctor to analyze our diet. We can just write down a piece of paper, keep a log of everything that our kiddos are eating, and see how much processed food, how much sugar is actually going into their bodies. One of the things that we may not think about when we think about the brain are neurotransmitters. Now, neurotransmitters, there's dozens of them in our bodies, and this is just a short list. If you have the book, The Connected Child, which I'll recommend later in the resources, you can find this on page 204 and a lot of information on through 207 about neurotransmitters. But these are actually chemicals that are showing up in our bodies naturally that help either to excite us or to help calm us. Now, oftentimes with our kiddos who have experienced early harm, and like I said, your child may not have experienced abuse or neglect, but maybe your child was born prematurely, or you had a difficult birth, it was really high stress while you were carrying your child. All of these things can contribute to harm. And so what we can see here on our list is a lot of different neurotransmitters that actually provide optimal levels of behavior when these are in a balance. But when they're not in a balance, we can see a lot of different behaviors, a lot of different inappropriate things that may come out that really bring about stress, not only within a child, but also within a family unit. So one of my favorites you've already heard me talk about is serotonin, right there in the middle. Now you can see it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. It helps to provide a sense of calm, a sense of well-being. When this is in balance, we see that our kiddos are able to have a pleasant affect. They look happy. They're maybe dancing around a little more than they're used to. But when this is at an imbalance, we see our kiddos and even ourselves, we experience high stress. We can also experience depression and insomnia. Because our body is not able to calm itself, oftentimes our kiddos are often not able to fall asleep. So it may take them a really long time. So serotonin gets released in our bodies. And if you have ever struggled with things like anxiety or depression, your doctor may have prescribed what's called an SSRI that actually inhibits the reuptake of serotonin. It allows serotonin to stay in your brain. So the serotonin you're already creating in your body allows it to stay in that gray matter in your brain for longer in order that you feel this sense of contentment and well-being in your life. Dopamine is another great neurotransmitter that we're all interested in getting. Now, it's a stimulating neurotransmitter, and that helps us to think more clearly. It gives us this sense of pleasure and enjoyment. Now, a lot of times what's happening is that we are experiencing dopamine, and especially our kiddos, we are experiencing drops of dopamine from triggers and from things that are not necessarily healthy for all times. So things like computer games, our phones, TV shows, this can oftentimes drop dopamine in our brain because it is exciting. We can receive pleasure. Maybe seeing a photograph of a loved one or a video of something really funny on the internet might make us laugh and might give us this sense of enjoyment. But oftentimes this can really put us at a disadvantage. Because we get so much dopamine, it takes us more and more and more. It takes us looking at more videos, experiencing more pleasure to actually feel that high that we feel when dopamine drops in our bodies. So when this is at an imbalance, sometimes we see symptoms similar to autism and to ADHD. This might come up as even a lack of motivation or joy, or maybe even aggressiveness or poor memory. But you can see here several neurotransmitters that are all that can all be manipulated and that can all be supported by our diet. So I would encourage you to really look at that. especially if your kiddos have come from a hard place. Kids who have been harmed in the past or experienced high stress in their early childhood, it's oftentimes harder for them to become they're either easily excited or they may be more easily distressed. Whereas a child with maybe a typical development, especially in early childhood, may not have these same struggles. So that's definitely something to look into. So our next area we're going to look at, here's are the foods. That's right. I wanted to list this out, foods for neurotransmitter health. So you can see I just picked 3. And we know that that these are all whole foods. You can see there's nothing processed. Generally, you're not going to find these wrapped in plastic in our grocery store. They're going to be on that outer edge, maybe except the brown rice. We're probably not harvesting that for ourselves. But you can see these are a lot of whole, fresh foods, which is going to contribute to that gut health. So it's really going to increase that serotonin development as well. So our next area to look at is sleep. Now, we know we all get a little irritable when we are looking at sleep and we're lacking sleep and we need more. Now, I'm like that too, and my kids are definitely like this. But when we are looking at behavior issues, sleep is one of the pinnacle things that we need to take into consideration. We can have kids that are have much easier times getting more aggravated, getting cranky, getting irritable. Talk about difficulties learning. It's so hard for us to concentrate when we've not had adequate numbers of sleep. Now, if you look on the left side, you'll see exactly how many. Now, this is from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, but this is also the same numbers that the American Academy of Pediatrics puts out as well. So it's the same numbers. But if we're talking our school-age kids from age 6 to 12, they're looking at 9 to 12 hours of sleep. Now, if you're like me and you live in a school district where we got to get up early to get our young kiddos to school, that means we've really got to back up our time in the evenings and try to get to bed at an early time, right? Maybe earlier than when you and I had to go to sleep, because maybe we didn't go to school as early as our kiddos are now. So we really have to look at the context and the environment where our kids are and say, how much time, how much effort do we need to put in into organizing and structuring our evening routines in order to help get them into a great place in order to go to sleep. Now, I think that starts at the dinner table. It starts when we are preparing for bed and providing those good, solid routines for our kiddos. And I know you and I probably have some of those same things that we are looking to do in the evenings that kind of help get us ready. Maybe you lay out your clothes in the morning. Maybe you have, just a routine that you go through. You pack your bag for the next day, things like that. Our kiddos need those same things in order for them to help get good sleep. If you don't know if your child is getting enough sleep, or you're like, I'm not really sure if this is affecting them, check out see how their creativity level is. If your kids who are naturally creative, naturally able to tell you stories or create little art projects, or they like to draw, if there seems to be a decrease in that creativity, that's an excellent way to say, there could be an issue with sleep. Also, memory formation suffers when we have a lack of sleep, which, guys, this is exactly what we need to do in school, right? When our kiddos go, we want them to be able to remember things. We want them to be able to take in and then several days later draw out some of those same information, same facts to synthesize the information, not only in their daily lives, but also in the classroom. And when there's not adequate sleep, this can suffer so much. So definitely check those out. We know we have seen so many studies, you guys have seen this already, about blue lights from our phones and tablets also keeping us from being able to get deep, restful sleep. And so there may be a time in the evening where you guys pull back and say, we are going to not have tablet time, not have phone time, and save those for during the day. So let's check out our next one, and it is exercise and healthy touch. Now, we know that healthy touch provides for excellent brain chemistry. And one way that we can do this is by participating in healthy touch when our kids are moving and exercising. This helps to increase a synthesis of new brain cells and really decrease depression as well. So you can see all of these symptoms of depression and anxiety all throughout this presentation. This is what we're looking at decreasing. Safe touch also has been shown to lower aggression in teens. And so if you have a teen, which oftentimes our relationships change, those dynamics change with our kiddos. So whereas maybe when they were younger, we snuggled them more, right? We got on the couch and they sat next to us, or, you know, we're walking into a store, maybe they hold our hands, but when they're teenagers, right, this stops a lot. And so what happens is the safe touch decreases at such a drastic amount when our kids hit puberty and get older because of social norms maybe in our area. We also can see their aggression arises. And so one great thing is to figure out what are some games maybe that you guys can play where there's some healthy touch. You know, maybe you're not having tickle wars like you are when your kiddos are younger, but maybe there are some games, excuse me, that your teen may enjoy where there is some touch and where there is healthy interaction and connection, where you're using good, strong eye contact and using healthy touch, like touching their hands or their shoulder, or even just saying, can I give you a hug, or can I hug you? And maybe asking, instead of when they were younger, maybe you just went up and hugged them. We all crave touch. We really do. And even if we say, no, I don't like to touch people, maybe there are certain people in your life that you do want to touch. Our bodies and brains are wired to want that connection. Now, we may want it on our own terms, and we may want it when we want it and don't want it when we don't want it. But we're all wired for that. And so definitely as your children are getting into their teen years, looking at that is a really excellent way to help promote some social emotional well-being. Also, lots of multi-sensory interactive environments can really help reduce some repetitive behaviors that you might see in your kiddos. And so one thing that we can do as parents, as caregivers, and as teachers, as a social worker for myself, is really come up with activities and things that we can do in order to help provide this like rich sensory experience for our kids. This will help, like I said, those dopamine neurotransmitters drop in our brain. This is an excellent way to get that because it's such a safe and healthy way to get that dopamine to react in our brains. So let's take a look back. So here was our a snapshot of our video that we watched earlier about the new neural pathways. Now, what I wanted you to see is that over here, we can see on the right side, this white line, that was the neural pathway already ingrained in us. And the yellow line on the left is that new neural pathway that we're learning. The problem is, even when we learn the new neural pathway, the old one is still there for a little while. And the problem with that is that when we teach these kiddos something, we want them to forget the old way, right? It's like exactly what we want is for this to happen immediately. And the problem is it's never going to happen immediately. The problem is we want them to hear it one time and then start doing it. But even we did not learn it that way. And so what has to happen is we've ingrained this neural pathway into our brain, and this is the way we do this. We cry every time to get this need met. But really what we want is for them to communicate with their words how they feel instead of crying and tantruming. And so what happens is we're going to have both of that happening at the same time. And so it's going to feel a little like, are you learning this or are you not learning this? Sometimes you're doing this and sometimes you're not. Well, it's because that neural pathway is still there. So what we have to do is allow it to extinct itself, really. until that new neural pathway is the only one we revert to in order to get our needs met. It's really fascinating how our brain works. If you would like more information about any of this, two resources I love are The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel Kolk, and he founded the Trauma Institute in the Northeast. I mean, world renowned on talking about trauma, and all of his work with people who've experienced trauma. So if this falls into something that you're interested in, this is an excellent book. Now, for a while, your library may have it on their digital copy, may have an audio version. The audio version is excellent. I've listened to that as well. Really great. Second resource, Chapter 10 of The Connected Child. I referenced this book, I think, last month in our video, which you can find online if you'd like to go back and check that out. But Chapter 10 really focuses on brain-body health, and that section about neurotransmitters is really excellent. So if you're interested in learning more, hearing more about what you can do in order to support this work in your children, this is an excellent resource. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I am just delighted to be able to do this for you guys and to talk about things that I'm interested in. So you can give us a call at the Coleman Center. I'm trying to move this out of the way. You can give us a call at the Coleman Center at 601-584-4704 if you have any questions. You can email me at jennifer.sheridan@petalschools.com. And we just appreciate you for joining us today on the video. And we look forward to being with you next month for our next parent education webinar. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.